Hey, Crystal Maiden here for part 11 Minish Cap. So now we're going into the other half of the ice dungeon. The Temple of Droplets. It's basically a combination water and ice dungeon, but it's not really a water dungeon because usually water dungeons in Zelda games have a puzzle where you change how high up the water is, and that gives you access to new areas and lets you get treasure chests you previously couldn't. This dungeon doesn't really do that, it just has water in it so that you can traverse with the lily pad, and that's pretty much it. And again, I don't know why ice floors are programmed so that when you fall off them, you don't respawn exactly where you fell, because that's what happens when you fall into a bottomless pit off a regular floor. It feels like lazy programming. It's so easy for me to get impatient here and try to go too fast, and then I fall into the pit. And so now you go down that staircase, and then you have to go down once more to push the lever so that you can get to the process of melting the ice around that treasure chest. But you can't really do anything just yet because you had to close that door or whatever so that you could walk across it to get to the lever. And you push that lever and it lets sunlight go onto it. And now that there's sunlight to go down to here, now you just push that lever. And why do you have to be so precise with it? It's so easy to walk past it, we don't want to. And now you got a key. Now you can go into here for the mini boss of this dungeon. Expecting a new mini boss? Too bad, Waluigi time. Well, actually, it is sort of a new mini boss, but it's very similar to the boss of the first dungeon. What is it with this dungeon and reusing previous bosses? Really, the only thing different about this boss is the electricity. And when it surrounds itself with electricity, you can't use a gust jar on it to any sort of effect. The boss is a little harder, but not by much. It's pretty much the exact same fight over again. And it doesn't even make sense because there aren't even any blue choo-choos. There aren't even any blue choo-choos in Lake Hylia, to my recollection. At least with Minish Woods, it was justified because there were green choo-choos around. And at least you saw a cutscene of the green choo-choo going into the dungeon for no reason. Here, it just shows up. And you're left wondering how it got here in the first place, and why it decided to show up. You get plenty of sword upgrades in this game, but I'm not entirely sure if each and every single sword upgrade gives you better damage output. I'm not entirely sure about that. I do like how the hilt of the sword constantly changes color though. It does a good job of making you feel like you have a sense of progression. I didn't mean for my sword to hit it when it was sticking out and deal the least amount of damage possible. But it just happened because I happened to be facing south when it fell, and it fell into my sword. Yeah, isn't this a huge disappointment? This is the Flame Lantern. A lot of people were probably looking forward to getting the Fire Rod in this place, because there's all sorts of ice that you can melt in the ice dungeon, and you never, up until this point, you never went into. There weren't really many points in the dungeon where you went into a dark room. So it can be easy to get disappointed because you think, oh man, I'm gonna get the Fire Rod. And because I don't have a magic meter, I can just spam it to my heart's content like in Link's Awakening. This is gonna be awesome. And then you're gonna be massively disappointed. the lantern somehow manages to be even worse than in previous games. Because you have to equip it in order to use it. It's not like in Link to the Past, where you can just walk into a dark room, and as long as it's in your inventory, it'll light up the dark room. No, here, you have to waste one of your 2 item slots and press the lantern button in order to have the lantern do anything. Why? I will compliment the amount of distance that the light travels, though. I love how large the light circle is. Cause in Link to the Past, it wasn't nearly big enough, and so you constantly felt like you were getting cheap hits, because you would run into enemies, or they would run into you too quickly for you to react. It was like you were playing a 2D Sonic game. At least here, the circle of light is big enough that you never feel like you're stumbling around blind anyways. And unlike Between Worlds, it was the worst of all, because the ball of light is pathetically small in that game. And it's really dim, so you still feel like you're stumbling around blind. And you still feel like you're getting cheap-shotted. So at least in terms of the area of effect, the lantern is the best it's ever been. But I still would have preferred the candle from Zelda 1, where you just use it in a dark room once, and it lights it all up, and there's no darkness left at all. And I would have specifically preferred the red candle, because you can use it as many times as you want. Whereas the blue candle, you can only use it once in one screen, and then you have to leave the screen to use it again, which was really stupid. Cause like if you run out of fire, and that's why you can't use it again, then why is it that you can use it again after you leave the screen? This is another puzzle that stumped me as a kid. It's not really that hard though. And whenever I come into this room, I'm always reminded of how I once played through this game using codes that have all of the items from the very beginning. But here's where I got stuck, because if you have the fully upgraded 4 sword, it is literally impossible to get past this point of the dungeon. So I got hopelessly stuck. Because you create 3 clone links, and so there's no way to avoid one of them disappearing. That ice block is completely useless, so it's perfectly fine to... Or is it? Yeah, it is. What you gotta do is have the ice block over a very specific switch, and you won't know which one until you've done it. Like this puzzle is trial and error. You can't have it be this way because you'll probably see the clone link goes into the wall and he disappears. And the ice floor is so slippery that you can very easily slide into a floor tile you don't want to. It's pretty slow and tedious and exact. I just hate how we didn't get the fire rod in this dungeon. Why can't we just get the lantern later, like as a gift from an NPC or something? Why can't we just get the fire rod here? The description of the Ice Wizrobes figurine, because yes, there are Ice Wizrobes in this game, and those are going to be fun to deal with. I do like the novel concept of melting ice to get to those floor tiles, though. That's pretty creative. And it's pretty cool how you can attack enemies with the clone link, and you have twice the radius of before. So like you have more range than normal, and you feel like you have more attack power than normal. But you don't really encounter enemies when you have a clone link traveling behind you that often. Which is sort of good, since it would suck if you had to make it again because the enemy ran into your clone link and made it disappear. But the description of the Ice Wizrobes figurine in the European version of the game taunts you by mentioning the fire rod. Because it absolutely proves that they were planning originally to have the fire rod be something you could get in this dungeon. But for whatever reason, they changed it. I think it's a classic example of the whole insider-outsider perspective problem, where when you're making a game, you don't really think about how you can make it fun. You think about what's a cool, creative idea that I can put into it. You aren't really... It's hard for you to get the idea that this might not be fun to play. This might be exhausting. Like, using your items to go back to previous dungeons that you should have already beaten and get treasure from them you could have originally. That sounds like a really cool idea in theory, but in practice, everyone hates backtracking. I like how you can burn the webs by walking into them with the lantern. Like, that's a new mechanic added to this, is that you can burn stuff just by walking into it if you had the lantern out. But it would have been a lot cooler if you could accomplish that from a distance with a fire rod. But instead, they decided to go for a new idea by making the lantern a pathetic, inferior imitation of the fire rod. Like, do you know how awesome it would have been to be able to... Do you know how awesome it would have been to be able to attack enemies from afar with a magic rod? But no. You know, in all of that time that you spent staring at the ice element in disbelief, you could have very easily grabbed it before the Octorok sucked it in. Cutscene incompetence. And again, why do you have to be so precise? Why do you have to stand the exact center in order to open the chest? This is probably the most menacing that an Octorok will ever be. Trying to one-hit run this boss was ridiculous. It was during my one-hit run, or one of my many failed attempts at it, until I finally got it right, that I discovered that you don't need the shield to deflect the... Because you would expect that only the shield can deflect his boulders. But actually you can deflect them just by attacking. So you don't really attack him with your sword at all. So there's really no reason to have the sword equipped. It's just so annoying how the water freezes over for no reason other than just to make the boss even more difficult. And because of the ice floor being so slippery, it's easy to overshoot your target and end up missing when you're trying to set it on fire. And constantly spinning around, and you can think, oh well, it makes it easy because it's spinning in just the right direction and I can just move in the other direction. But it starts spinning clockwise, but then can instantly turn around and start spinning counterclockwise. How is that fair? So you're trying to use strategy and ingenuity to light its tail on fire quickly, but then it instantly starts spinning in the opposite direction, and well, that screwed up your whole plan. It's also very hard to tell what exactly its sign is that it's going to suck you in instead of spitting out a boulder. You don't really... It's not like Wind Waker where you need the iron boots to avoid getting sucked in. Here you can just roll away from it. And why does the room have to get darker? It doesn't really make it all that... It doesn't make it more challenging. Especially considering how big the ball of light is. And the boulders are pretty easy to dodge. And you can't attack the boss during this time at all. So it just feels like a waste of time. It feels like it pads out the game. But at last you finally defeated it. And I don't know how I managed to finally beat that boss without getting hit. But now we finally got the water element. I'm not really sure why it's shaped the way it is. Cause with the earth element, it was sort of shaped like a rose. It was sort of shaped like a flower, so it sort of made sense. And with the fire element, it was shaped like the Goron's rupee, and Gorons are associated with fire, so it made sense. You have to, like, I really wish that getting into the green portal would warp you here, instead of you having to tediously untrick yourself first. So, how did he know that he should appear to at that exact time? See you in the next part.